Most Christians celebrate Easter, but very few truly understand what Jesus actually went through in the final 7 days of his life. What really happened between the cheers of Palm Sunday and the silence of the tomb? Why did the same crowd that shouted Hosanna suddenly cry out, "Crucify him," just days later? And what if I told you that every moment of that week was intentional, prophetic, and deeply personal for you? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will never see Passion Week the same way again. It begins with a moment that looks like victory. Jesus enters Jerusalem. The city is alive, crowds gathering, voices rising, anticipation filling the air. People are laying down palm branches and cloaks on the road. It feels like a royal welcome. They shout, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." This is what they've been waiting for. A savior, a king, a deliverer. But here's what most people miss. Jesus doesn't enter on a war horse. He rides in on a donkey. In that culture, a king on a horse symbolized power, conquest, and war. But a king on a donkey, that symbolized peace, humility, and surrender. Right from the beginning, Jesus is telling them something. I am not the king you expected, but I am the king you need. And that's where the tension begins. Because the people weren't looking for salvation from sin. They were looking for freedom from Rome. They wanted a political revolution. But Jesus came for a spiritual one. And while the crowds are celebrating, there's another group watching closely. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. They don't see a savior, they see a threat. Because every word Jesus speaks, every miracle he performs, every crowd he draws, it challenges their authority, their control, their system. And now, as he enters Jerusalem surrounded by praise, they realize something dangerous. If they don't stop him, they might lose everything. The next day, Jesus does something unexpected. He walks into the temple, the very heart of worship. But what he finds there isn't worship. It's corruption. Money changers are exploiting people. Merchants are turning sacred space into a marketplace. Religion had become business. And instead of quiet reverence, there's noise, greed, and manipulation. And this is where we see a side of Jesus many people don't talk about. He gets angry. Not out of selfishness, but out of righteousness. He begins overturning tables, driving people out, declaring, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." This wasn't just an emotional reaction. It was a direct confrontation, a bold, public challenge to a broken religious system. And in that moment, everything changes. Because now, it's no longer just tension, it's a decision. The religious leaders are no longer just observing Jesus. They are plotting against him. This act in the temple becomes the turning point. From this moment on, they begin actively looking for a way to kill him. But Jesus doesn't run. He doesn't hide. Instead, he keeps showing up. Day after day, he teaches in the temple, speaking truth, telling parables, exposing hypocrisy, calling people back to genuine faith. And every word he speaks cuts deeper. Not just into the hearts of the people, but into the pride of the leaders. They try to trap him with questions, trying to make him slip, trying to turn the crowd against him. But every time, he answers with wisdom they can't deny, and authority they can't challenge. At the same time, Jesus begins to speak about something even more intense: the future. He talks about coming judgment, about the destruction of the temple, about signs of the end. It's urgent. It's serious. It's as if he knows time is running out. And yet, in the middle of all this tension, there's something even more heartbreaking unfolding behind the scenes. Not outside, but inside his circle, among his closest followers. Someone is about to betray him. Not a stranger, not an enemy, but someone who walked with him, ate with him, learned from him, trusted him. And that betrayal is closer than anyone realizes. But we'll get to that, because what happens next will change everything. If you're still watching, take a moment right now and type Hosanna in the comments. Let's declare his kingship together. And if this is already opening your eyes, make sure you like this video and subscribe, because the next part of this story, take it even deeper. As we step into the most intimate and painful moments of this week, the betrayal, the Last Supper, and the night Jesus wrestled in the garden. Stay with me. What happens next is one of the most painful and personal moments in all of history. Because while Jesus is still teaching, still healing, still pouring himself out, a decision has already been made behind the scenes. A betrayal is in motion. One of his own disciples, Judas Iscariot, a man who walked with Jesus, witnessed miracles, heard every sermon, sat at the same table. He goes to the chief priests and offers them a deal. For 30 pieces of silver, he agrees to hand Jesus over. 30. The price of a slave. Think about that for a moment. Jesus wasn't rejected by strangers first. He was betrayed by someone close, someone who knew him. And maybe that hits deeper than anything else in this story, because it reminds us, not all wounds come from enemies. Some come from people we trusted. Now we move into one of the most sacred moments of Passion Week, the Last Supper. Jesus gathers with his disciples for what seems like a normal Passover meal. But this night is anything but normal, because Jesus knows this is his final meal before the cross. As they sit together, he takes bread, breaks it, and says, "This is my body, given for you." Then he takes the cup and says, "This is my blood, poured out for many." In that moment, Jesus is doing something extraordinary. He's not just sharing a meal. He's establishing a new covenant, a new relationship between God and humanity, not based on rituals, but on sacrifice, not based on law, but on grace. And then, he says something that shocks everyone at the table. "One of you will betray me." You can imagine the silence, the confusion, the fear. Each disciple begins to ask, "Is it me?" Even Judas. And what's even more powerful is that Jesus doesn't expose him publicly. He doesn't humiliate him. He gives him space. Even in betrayal, Jesus shows restraint, mercy, love. But that's not the only warning that night. Jesus turns to Peter, one of his closest, most passionate followers, and says, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." Peter can't believe it. He insists, "No, Lord, I would never do that." But Jesus already knows what pressure will do, what fear will do, what human weakness looks like. And maybe that's another truth we don't like to admit. Sometimes we overestimate our strength until we're tested. After the meal, Jesus leads his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, a quiet garden, a place of prayer. But this night, it becomes a place of deep anguish. Jesus begins to feel the full weight of what's coming. Not just the physical pain of the cross, but the spiritual burden, the sin of the world, the separation, the suffering. He tells his disciples, "Stay here and watch with me." But as he steps away to pray, something profound happens. For the first time, we see the depth of his struggle. He falls to the ground and prays, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." That cup represents everything he is about to endure: the pain, the shame, the weight of sin. But then he says something that changes everything. "Yet not my will, but yours be done." In that moment, Jesus chooses obedience over escape, surrender over comfort, purpose over pain. And while he is pouring out his heart in prayer, his disciples, they fall asleep. The very ones he asked to stay awake couldn't stay with him for even 1 hour. And maybe that moment is more relatable than we think. Because how often do we drift when we should be watching? How often do we sleep spiritually in moments that matter most? Jesus returns to prayer again and again, until finally the moment arrives. Lights appear in the distance, torches, voices, footsteps. A crowd approaches the garden. Soldiers, officials, and leading them is Judas. He walks up to Jesus and greets him with a kiss, a sign of affection turned into a signal of betrayal. And just like that, Jesus is arrested, not because he was overpowered, but because he allowed it. The disciples panic, fear takes over, and one by one, they run. The one they followed, the one they believed in, is now being taken away. And this is where everything shifts, from betrayal to injustice, from the garden to the courtroom. If this is speaking to you, type "not my will" in the comments, and stay with me as we step into the trials, the cross, and the moment that changed eternity forever. What happens next is a chain of events so unjust, so painful, and yet so purposeful that it would change the course of human history forever. Jesus is taken from the garden, bound, surrounded, not as a king being honored, but as a criminal being accused. He is brought before the religious leaders, the same men who had been plotting against him. But here's the truth. They don't have real evidence. They don't have a legitimate case. So they begin to search for false witnesses, people willing to twist words, to create accusations, to justify a decision they had already made. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for a reason to condemn him. Finally, they ask him directly, "Are you the Son of God?" And Jesus answers, "Yes." That was all they needed. Not because it was false, but because they refused to believe it. They accuse him of blasphemy. They mock him. They strike him. The one who healed the sick is now being abused. The one who spoke truth is now being silenced. But the religious leaders don't have the authority to execute him, so they take him to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. Pilate examines Jesus, questions him, looks for a reason to charge him. But he finds nothing. No crime, no guilt, no threat deserving death. And yet, the pressure begins to build. The crowd gathers, voices grow louder. The same city that once shouted, "Hosanna!" now echoes with a different cry, "Crucify him!" Pilate offers them a choice, a tradition. He can release one prisoner. He presents Jesus and another man named Barabbas, a known criminal. Surely they will choose Jesus. But they don't. They choose Barabbas and demand that Jesus be crucified. Think about that. The innocent is rejected. The guilty is released. And without realizing it, they are acting out a deeper truth. Jesus would take the place of the guilty. Pilate, trying to avoid responsibility, washes his hands and hands Jesus over to be crucified. What follows is suffering beyond words. Jesus is beaten, mocked, crowned with thorns, forced to carry his cross. Step by step, he walks toward Golgotha, the place of the skull, where he will be crucified. Nails are driven into his hands and feet. He is lifted up, hanging between heaven and earth. And even there, in unimaginable pain, Jesus speaks, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." In the middle of suffering, he chooses forgiveness. To one of the criminals beside him, he says, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Even in his final moments, he is still saving, still loving, still reaching. Darkness falls over the land. Hours pass. And then, Jesus cries out, "It is finished." Not, "I am finished," but, "It is finished." The mission, the sacrifice, the payment for sin, completed. And at that moment, he gives up his spirit. The earth shakes. The temple veil tears in two, from top to bottom. That veil separated humanity from God. And now, it's gone. Because Jesus made a way. His body is taken down, placed in a tomb, a stone rolled in front, guards posted. It looks like the end, hope buried, silence settling in. But this is not the end of the story. On the third day, something happens that no one expected. The stone is rolled away. The tomb is empty. Jesus is alive. Death is defeated. The grave has lost its hold, and everything Jesus said is proven true. He appears to his disciples, speaks to them, restores them, and gives them a mission: to go into the world and share this good news. And that brings us here, because this isn't just a story about what happened back then. It's about what it means for you, right now. If Jesus went through betrayal, suffering, rejection, and the cross, just to make a way for you, the question is, how will you respond? If you believe this, type "He is risen" in the comments. And if this video touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because Passion Week wasn't just about his sacrifice, it was about your salvation.